The current King of England was crowned at the age of 73, meaning he is the oldest monarch ever to take the throne. Even if Charles lives as long as his father, he will only have 27 years left to reign, assuming he doesn't abdicate before he dies. So, who is next in line after Charles? And how did he become king anyway? Join us as we explore how the line of succession works in the British royal family. There have been 63 monarchs of Britain and England over the last 1,200 years. These started with Egbert in 827 CE, although some historians believe Alfred the Great was the first to rule over a unified England. Egbert was the first to rule over a large portion of England, in this case the Anglo-Saxon settlements. Egbert was succeeded by his son Aethelwulf in 839. Then pretty much all of Aethelwulf's son had to go after Aethelbald forced his father to abdicate around 856. The kings of England continued to be male descendants of Egbert until 1016, when Canute the Dane took the throne. Also known as Canute the Great, he was elected by the King's Council, forcing the hereditary king, Edward II Ironside, to divide his kingdom with Canute. Less than a year later, Edmund died under mysterious circumstances, so Canute took complete control and married Edmund's stepmother. Canute was succeeded by his illegitimate son, Harold Harefoot, who took control while his half-brother and rightful heir was in Denmark, only to die 3 years later. Then Canute's rightful heir took the throne but died at the age of 24, leaving the title to his mother's son from her first marriage, Edward the Confessor, who also happened to be the half-brother of Edmund Ironside. Confused? Well, the line of succession isn't always a straight one. Edward the Confessor died childless in 1066, leaving the claim to the English throne wide open. Despite not having any hereditary claim to the title, Harold Godwinson was elected as king, but he was among several nobles claiming Edward had promised them the throne. Harold's reign did not last a year before another claimant invaded England. The Norman conquest in the 11th century, led by William the Conqueror, is most commonly thought of as the start of the line of succession as we know it today. At this time, it was properly established that the king's first legitimate son would take the throne in the event of his father's death. This practice was known as primogeniture and was well established in that period as the distribution of property and wealth of a deceased person. It must be stressed that the throne was only supposed to go to children that the king fathered with the queen. Many kings had plenty of mistresses that often had the king's babies, but they were not considered of royal blood. This rule was due to the nobles wanting to ensure the line of succession only included noble families. As many royal marriages were diplomatic, the offspring of the recognized queen needed to end up on the throne. Of course, this did not always work, and there were challenges by children considered to be illegitimate. As we've already seen, the line of succession was not always straightforward, and many factors affected the hereditary office. Not all kings produced a male heir. Some didn't produce an heir at all, and as the generations of royals went on, more people felt they had a legitimate claim to the throne. There was also the added factor that as a younger brother, you would need your older brother to die if you wanted to be king. In fact, there is a theory that William the Conqueror's successor, also called William, was shot by his younger brother Henry in order for Henry to take the throne. Only passing the throne to a male heir didn't always work well. Henry had lost his 2 sons in a shipwreck and named his daughter Matilda his successor. However, upon his death, the king's council thought it unfit for a woman to rule and passed the crown to her cousin Stephen. Stephen was an inefficient leader, and constant raids nearly destroyed the country. Then, a civil war erupted when Matilda returned to claim her throne. Eventually, a treaty was reached, and Matilda's son would become Stephen's successor. After Matilda's son ruled, there was a relatively straightforward line of succession, except for the odd, angry ex-wife with a hot poker, until the famous Wars of the Roses. The roots of this feud came when Richard II succeeded his grandfather Edward III. Richard was an unjust and unpopular ruler who was deposed in 1399 by his cousin Henry IV of the House of Lancaster. The line of succession was challenged when Henry IV's grandson, Henry VI, started showing symptoms of a hereditary mental illness. Henry VI's cousin, Richard, Duke of York, was made protector of the realm, basically making him a not quite king. The House of York decided this was the best time to make a play for the throne, as they had just as much legitimacy as Henry VI. While Richard, Duke of York, nearly became king, his son would take the throne of England next. It didn't go well. His eldest son, Edward IV, was unpopular, and when he died, he named his 12-year-old son king. The young king didn't see his next birthday and was killed after nearly 3 months of wearing the crown. The most popular theory is that, along with his younger brother, the young monarch was murdered in the Tower of London by his uncle, Richard III. The Wars of the Roses ended with Richard's death on the battlefield and the crowning of Henry VII, who was another descendant of Edward III. Henry VII was succeeded by his son, the infamous Henry VIII, and his children would dramatically end the male domination of the English throne. Henry's quest for a son only yielded one boy, the sickly Edward VI. But he listed his eldest daughter, Mary, in the line of succession, followed by his daughter from his second marriage, Elizabeth. Edward succeeded his father at the age of 9, but died just 6 years later. Edward hated the idea that he would be succeeded by a woman, especially his elder sister Mary, who was a staunch Catholic. Being too young to produce an heir, he eventually resigned himself to name a woman as his heir, England's first female monarch, Lady Jane Grey. Lady Jane was the great-granddaughter of Henry VII and the ward of the power-hungry Thomas Seymour, husband to Henry VIII's widow, Catherine Parr. Seymour had hoped that Jane would marry Edward, giving him tenuous access to the throne. But he was executed for treason in 1549. And so, another man, John Dudley, orchestrated Jane's succession. Dudley was Jane's father-in-law and hoped his son would be named king when Jane took the throne. Lady Jane was queen for just 9 days, making her the shortest reigning monarch in British history. Dudley had underestimated the popularity of Henry VIII's daughter Mary, who, with the support of the people, took the throne by force in 1553, imprisoning and executing her rival. Although Mary knew Jane was merely a pawn, she also knew her position was precarious. In 1558, Mary died, leaving the throne to her half-sister Elizabeth. After over 700 years of male rule, now Britain had had 3 queens in 5 years. When Elizabeth died childless, she named her cousin, James, King of Scotland, as her heir, finally uniting England and Scotland. James's son, Charles I, nearly ended the line of succession altogether. He believed that ruling was not just his hereditary right, but also his divine right. His enthusiasm for bringing back the absolute rule of the king led to civil war and the end of monarchical rule in Britain. However, Oliver Cromwell, the self-proclaimed Lord Protector of England, continued the idea of hereditary rule when he appointed his son, Richard, as his successor. Richard only lasted for almost 9 months before the monarchy was brought back in the form of Charles II, the son of Charles I. While Charles II had as many as 21 children, none were legitimate, so the crown passed to his brother. James II was a Catholic who became unpopular due to his persecution of the Protestant clergy, despite having 2 Protestant daughters. Wanting to place a Protestant on the throne, the English Parliament contacted the Dutch Prince William of Orange, asking him to bring his army and depose James. William was to marry James's daughter, Mary, and the two became joint monarchs until Mary's death, after which William ruled alone. Before being crowned, Parliament created the Bill of Rights, declaring that succession could be regulated by parliamentary statute and not solely through descent. Parliament then added the Act of Settlement to constitutional law, confirming that Parliament had the power to deprive the sovereign of their title in the case of misgovernment. Mary died childless, so Mary's sister Anne became queen after William died in 1702. Anne had a string of unviable pregnancies, and her only child died of smallpox aged 11. With no heirs, a wariness of Catholics, and the lawful right to determine the next monarch, Parliament decided that the crown should go to the nearest Protestant relative of the current royal line. Sophia was the cousin of James II and next in line, but died just 2 weeks before Anne, so the crown passed to Sophia's son, George. George had been born in Germany, never learned to speak English, even during his 13-year reign, and spent most of his time in Hanover, Germany. leaving the running of the country to England's first Prime Minister. George I was succeeded by the slightly more anglicized George II, followed by English-born George III, whose son, George IV, ruled as Prince Regent when his father was deemed unfit due to a hereditary condition. George IV had only one heir, but as she died before he did, the crown was passed to George's brother, William. William II died with no heirs, and next in line on this occasion was Victoria, the niece of George IV and William IV. Victoria's father had died when she was young, and as her uncles had no surviving children, she ascended to the throne and became one of the most famous British monarchs. Victoria begat the current line of the British royal family, the House of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha. Victoria was succeeded by her son, Edward VII. Victoria's grandson, George V, changed the family name to Windsor during the First World War, in an attempt to cut ties with their Germanic roots. Next came George V's son, Edward VIII, whose relationship with a divorcee caused him to abdicate after 6 months on the throne. Edward's brother, George VI, was then crowned. When George VI died unexpectedly, his 25-year-old daughter, Elizabeth, ascended to the throne. During Queen Elizabeth II's reign, the Succession of the Crown Act was amended to end the system of male primogeniture. Because while England did have reigning queens, it was still in law that a younger son could displace an elder daughter as successor to the throne. As Queen Elizabeth II's reign was exceptionally long, many began to speculate whether her eldest son, Charles, would be overlooked and the crown go directly to Elizabeth's grandson, William. After all, Charles was married to a divorcee, which was the very reason Edward VIII was forced to abdicate, leading to Charles's grandfather becoming king. Also, as Charles was in his 70s, some felt he was too old to take the throne. However, when Queen Elizabeth died on September 8, 2022, Charles became king. Today, the line of succession is as follows. The current Prince of Wales, Prince William, is the first in line. Second is William's eldest son, Prince George. Then William's daughter, Charlotte, followed by William's youngest son, Louis. If something were to happen to William and his children, Prince Harry would become the next king, followed by his eldest son, Archie, then his daughter, Lilibet. Eighth in line to the throne would be William and Harry's uncle, Prince Andrew, then his daughter, Beatrice, her daughter, Sienna, and then Andrew's youngest daughter, Eugenie. Princess Eugenie's daughter, August, is 12th in line, followed by her son, Ernest. Coming in at number 14 is Queen Elizabeth's youngest son, Edward. Edward's children, James and Louise, are 15th and 16th in line, followed by Queen Elizabeth's youngest daughter, Anne, and her family. First, her son and his children, then her daughter and hers. So, there you have it, the British line of succession explained. It is not always a straight path to the throne of England, and is subject to the whims of fate and the will of the people in Parliament. Although the line of succession is set, it is not in stone, and what the future holds for the British royal family is still to be seen. How would you like to get a deeper understanding of history, impress your friends, and predict the future more accurately based on past events? If this sounds like something you might be into, then check out the brand new Captivating History Book Club by clicking the first link in the description. To learn more about British history, check out our book, History of England, a captivating guide to English history, starting from antiquity through the rule of the Anglo-Saxons, Vikings, Normans, and Tudors to the end of World War II. It's available as an ebook, paperback, and audiobook. If you found the video captivating, please hit the like button and subscribe for more videos like this.